Okay, we're getting ready to head off to work here. This will be the second trip for this car. I mean, driving it a couple miles around the neighborhood here to kind of test things out, and then last night I went down and fueled it up. That was, 14 miles. And other than the carburetor having that huge flat spot in it, it seemed to do pretty good. I have put 25 miles on it since I got it driving. Just warming it up here because it's a cold-blooded some beach. Show you a couple things. Now, I kind of like this layout. I like the round gauges. I like the round vent. Everything's just kind of here where you can see it well. I will probably replace that vacuum gauge. That one's, I think it works. I don't know how accurate it would be, but I'd rather put one in that fits a little better. It's a little bigger. And that one I think is actually, there's a little white plastic ring inside of them. I've got a couple of these gauges and you can see where it's cracked. Those chunks fall down and then it won't work anymore. I need to get rid of this light. Just take the bulb out of it. There's supposed to be a panel down here. So this thing tells you, hey, look at that panel, and then the panel tells you where the problem is. And there's things like, the power brake booster vacuum and brake lining wear, low oil, there's all kinds, low washer fluid, all kinds of stuff. This car was fairly advanced that way for 77, but that panel's missing. But on that, I'm thinking, when I do the swap, I kind of want to get rid of as much celica as possible. People, I'm kind of on the fence whether people will see the steering wheel, steering column, dashboard, and be like, oh, hey, you put a celica dashboard in your Cricket. Like, well, actually, I put a Cricket on a celica, but I like this layout. Especially even without the pad. I like that. But the dashboard, the rake of this windshield, the curve, there's so much dash here, plus there's all that, there's like 8 inches at least from the edge of the windshield out to the edge of the cowl. I think the Cricket windshield is going to end up about there, but it's going to go almost straight across. So like these wiper things will have to go. We'll have to use the Cricket stuff, which is fine. I just have to figure out how to wire it. I've done it before though with a Toyota Switch. I don't remember what I did though to make it work, but I digress. If I could use this, I'd like to use it, but I don't think there's going to be a way to do it, because I think when we get this done, the Cricket dashboard is going to be way the hell out here where those wiper pivots are, because the windshield will be. Because this whole A-pillar is going to be way out there because it doesn't rake like this. If I open the door here, you see it's kind of got this old early 60s Mopar anti-dog leg. You see how far away that is. Well, on the Cricket it comes straight up and then it goes into the B-pillar. This, it just kind of rakes back. So where that upper door hinge is about where everything will be. So we'll see. It's one of the things I've been watching these other guys do on their swaps that's kind of driving me nuts. It's their projects and they can do them however they want, and I don't care. But for my own self, like with the Miata, one of the big reasons I didn't want to use the Miata, and even worse, like Nathan Kershaw building the Mutt with the Z3, I think, and a Volkswagen Bug, is he's sitting in the back seat. His steering wheel is halfway through the door opening. His dashboard's going to be halfway through the door opening. He's going to have 2 feet of dashboard in the middle of that Super Beetle. And I think on the Miata it lends itself a little better towards moving everything forward, but on the Z3 you can't. There's just no way to move that stuff. I mean, you'd have a steering column that would be a foot long, and the pedals would be in your kneecaps. So that was one of the things that kind of talked me out of doing the Miata. Plus, I'd have to stretch the chassis and lengthen the drive shaft and all that crap. And then I'd have to make a wide body kit, which I kind of plan on doing anyway, but for a driver, I mean, for the race car, sure, but for a driver, I don't really want to do that. But that's why I did the measurements on the Corona and then slash Celica. I never had any hope towards finding a Celica. So this Celica is the perfect car to do the swap on the Cricket. 4-link rear suspension, the track is really close, the wheelbase is the same, but these cars tend to hold their value. I mean, even this thing's probably a $1,500 car, just the way it sits now, maybe $2,000 the way it sits now, even with the rust and the missing parts and everything. Just because these things hold their value, I don't want to sell it. It's the perfect platform for what I'm doing, but it's still going to take a lot of modification. On this thing, even being a sports car, it sits kind of raked back here, you know, the seat position, whatever. Part of that, and I've got a thing in my mind here about the measurements. Like the seat sits lower and farther back, and the steering column comes out towards you, the seat's laid back, the roof line's laid back, and you're driving it like that. But we're in the Cricket, the seat is going to be higher, and everything will be farther forward. But it's, you know, this is the same platform as the Corona, so I think the seat position is probably the same, other than the dash position. The steering wheel position, I think, are different. So we'll see. I mean, when we start chopping, making measurements, I kind of wish I had a Cricket here with me so I could start making measurements and comparisons, but I'm going to have to go off of the information that my friends in England will send me and the measurements I have here. I bought a frame dimension chart the other day and I got it in, and it's great, but the problem is it won't work for what I have. It shows me certain points of the chassis, and it should measure this between these 2 points, this point, this point. That's all it shows. It doesn't show, you know, well, it should be this wide at the sills and you know, it doesn't do that. So I'm gonna have to make my own chart, and I probably will. The plan for this thing is I'm driving it to work, I'm driving it home. I'll clean it out a little bit, and then tomorrow I've got to go back down to the in-laws and get started on swapping the engine in Christy's Jeep. So I'll be driving it 75 miles south to the in-laws, and then 75 miles back home after a week or so. I don't know. So yeah, I'm gonna be late, so I need to get moving, get heading down to work, and we'll check in with you probably this evening when I get off, and I'll let you guys know how it went. So here we are, cruising down the highway, doing about 62 miles an hour at 2,600 RPM in 5th gear. Doesn't seem like overdrive does a whole hell of a lot. Everything's doing pretty well. Temperature gauge is reading low, but you know, I know it's got a correct thermostat in it. Vacuum gauge is reading low, of course it is. Still got that moderate pull to it. I'm not going to let go of the steering wheel to demonstrate. Heater's working all right. Seems like it's got a decent amount of power when you get into it. I can't imagine how much better it'd be once the carburetor's sorted out. But this is where we're at for today, for now. I will show you some more in a little bit. Okay, so some notes from the trip. It is really lean in the primary circuit. A lot of the time I was actually running on the power circuit. So yeah, one thing that I want to try, and I could have even screwed this up. I gotta look at what the specs are, but you've got your main jet, you've got a progression jet, you've got an air bleed. So the air bleed controls how much air is mixed with the fuel in the emulsion tube. It also controls the timing. When you go into it controls the timing, but it's so minute you'll hardly ever notice a difference. But you'll notice it running lean before, the timing becomes a problem. But when you get into the main circuit and it pulls the fuel, if it's losing air, and we get back to the cracked straw thing. If you have a tiny little pinhole in the straw, you're still going to get a lot of soda. You got a big crack in it, you're going to be getting a lot of air, not a lot of soda. So it also controls, like I said, the timing where when you get into that circuit and it pulls the fuel up into the emulsion tube, if you're pulling more air, it's going to pull it in later. It's kind of hard to quantify how that affects anything, though. So when I put it together, I put the larger jet on the primary side and the smaller on the secondary, but it might actually supposed to be going the other way. But what I am going to try is to swap them anyway, because it doesn't matter as much on the secondary side. You get into the secondaries, they're going to run pretty good regardless. But as my brain is trickling through all this stuff, the more and more I'm thinking, I think it's supposed to have the smaller on the smaller side and the larger on the larger side, and the smaller main jet as well on the main side. But this carburetor was junk, and it did this before, and I think I'm just beating a dead horse here, or a dead carburetor in that case. But I'm going to try it anyway, because like I said, I was in the power circuit rather than the main circuit. Now the gas gauge has moved. We're slightly under full now, and so I'm worried that this thing's going to be getting really crappy mileage, especially if I'm running in the power circuit all the time. Or it could just be that, I consumed X amount of fuel and it's moved because it's fine, because the Courier would have done the same thing. It would have moved. I have now put 51 miles on this car. The speedometer is off by 4 miles an hour. The snow tires in the back are definitely smaller than what it's supposed to have. The pull to the left, the tire, of course I've only gone 51 miles, but the tire isn't worn weird at all. It doesn't feel like it's feathering or anything. If you look at it, you can see it looks like the camber is way off. I don't see anything damaged underneath. I don't feel anything moving when I'm driving. It doesn't look like anything's bent. There aren't any adjustments that you can do. At least not officially. I'm going to do some reading on it later though and see if there's anything. Running wise, seems like it idles pretty smooth around 1,000, 900, 1,000. Problem is when you have the heater blowing and you have the lights on, all the electrical load, then it drops it down to about 800, and then it doesn't like it. It doesn't run very smooth. So if I adjust the idle with the load on and you turn the load off, then it's suddenly idling at 1,200. So right now I got it where it's idling at 900 with the load and about 11 without the load, and I'm just going to have to live with it. Now as far as the valves go, I set them last night. You can hear them a little bit. And they're set to spec. It should be 8 on the intake side and 12 on the exhaust side. What the book says anyway. So they're set. But the vacuum gauge, the other vacuum gauge, is still fluttering. Buzzing. It smooths right out when you give it some gas, but regardless, it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And that, I think, is what's giving me my low vacuum reading. That's what's affecting the low idle speed problem. There really isn't anything I can do about it. I mean, there might be, the valves may be burnt. It might be damaged. There might just be dirt, rust in the seat, which is what I was hoping. I did get on this thing. It took up to about 90 miles an hour, which was scary with the front end doing what it's doing. But, get the valves getting hot, burn off whatever carbon may be in it, but it didn't seem to help any. On a lot of your old cars that have soft valve seats, and they're adjustable. You can back off the adjustment or run them loose, and they'll usually beat themselves back into the seat and seal up. It's not ideal, but it's better. Like, hydraulic lifters, they start leaking, there's nothing you can do about them. When they recess into the head, you run into the problem like with Matt's Mustang, where the valve spring tension can't overcome the hydraulic pressure in the lifter, and so the valves start leaking. What you do in that case is you can shim the springs, but if you're going to be into it that deep, you may as well just do a valve job on it. So like in this case, I suppose what I should have done is set them 1/1000th loose and ran it to see if it would fix it, but I don't know. I don't know. It's not that big a deal. It's not really important at the moment. It will be important though. So that's where we're at just on this initial trip. There's a few things I need to do. I gotta get this cigarette lighter port working so I can charge my battery. Oh, my cup holder. See, here we go. Woohoo! I need to carpet it or something because I don't want it scratching up my cup. Otherwise, I don't care. But it works. Drink my coffee. Door locks. I need to get the door locks working so I can lock this thing up right now. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work on the door locks real quick before the boss gets here and then lock it up and go to work. Okay, so I opened it up and I put a slightly smaller air bleed jet in it. And it doesn't really seem to be any improvement. I still have a pretty heavy flat spot. So, I mean, the accelerator pump's definitely squirting fuel. If it wasn't for that, it'd probably just quit. So we had that issue with the missing plug right there. And then I put some snot on top of it. And it's not leaking. I sprayed some stuff down there and it's not leaking. But that channel, here, I'll show you on this carburetor. See that channel? That's the plug that's missing right there. You see, that's where it draws vacuum. And it comes up that channel right there. And it pulls fuel through the progression jet, or they call them an idle jet sometimes. And it pulls vacuum through here, which goes to the this is where the power valve sits. And you can see there's the port, there's the channel, there's where the power valve diaphragm and spring sit. So there's an internal leak there. That's where I was saying that hole. You're not going to be able to see it, I don't think. If you look in there, there's a hole over here, and then there's a hole there. That's the one that's more important. Yeah, you can't really see it. Anyway, that hole is really distorted on this carburetor. This one is just a lot of corrosion. So I'm going to put it in that solution I've got and just let it soak for like a week. And it should take all this oxidation off. It might take some metal with it, but it's better than what I got. So that's junk. I meant to throw it away years ago. I gave it another chance. It's going in the trash. This one didn't really run any better, but I think it might be able to come back. If it doesn't, then I'll just have to find another one. So I did change the air bleed jet on the primary side. I went from a 180 to a 170. And while I still have a flat spot, if you rev it up, driving wise it's almost gone. The surge is gone. The power is way up. It drives like a normal car now as far as that goes. I am going to order a number 70 progression jet, and I think that'll take care of the rest of that flat spot. But for right now, it's running great. I mean, the only complaint I've got is the pulling to the left side. It's acting like it has a lot of positive camber, but it doesn't look like it does. And I looked at the old tires, and they're not worn weird, so I don't know what's going on there. I don't have the time to mess with it, though. I've got to go get the engine swapped in Christie's Jeep, so that's where we're at for now. Well, I've done about 160 miles on it, and it needs a carburetor. Other than that, it's doing pretty well. Seems like it's getting actually really good mileage. It is pulling to the left significantly. Like if I let go of it, I will cross the lane, but not immediately. So here it is. I'm not even planning on washing this thing. I'm just going to drive it, take it out to Kansas, cut the body off of it. Yep. So we are coming to, I suppose we're coming to the end. At least the end of what I'm going to do to this car. It's running and driving. I am going to attempt an idle progression jet and see if that doesn't help the flat spot. I don't know that it will, but we're going to try. If that doesn't work, I've got the original carburetor soaking, boiling, whatever you want to call it. I will throw it back on and see if it doesn't make a difference. But it's not that important. Like the way it is right now, I could drive it across the country. I'd rather not, but I could. The other things we got going on, I need to clean this all out soon. Right now, I've got the dash torn apart because the gauges are so dim you can barely see them, and the bulbs are black. So I'm just going to replace them, and I'm probably going to take apart the cluster and paint the inside of it white. But this kind of worries me. You can see that the needles are very deformed. I'm afraid if I touch them, they're going to break. The other thing is, there are cracks in these lenses that I could not see before, or maybe I cracked and pulled them out. I don't know. You see that crack there, and there's a bunch of little hairline cracks. Look at it, you can actually see them on camera. Huh. So, I may not do that. I think I'll change the bulbs and then see what it looks like. See how dark it's going to be tonight. If it's still too dark, then I'll take it apart and do it carefully. I need to oil up the heater controls. I need to vacuum up the remains of the mouse nest that's in there. Kind of clean this up. Last night I took measurements on everything, so I'll compare them to the Cricket measurements and see what's what. The other thing I've got going, this is the vacuum gauge that was in there, and it's awfully small. The other thing is, let's see if I can get it where you can see it here. If you look there, you see that crack? You see that white ring inside there? You see that crack? Well, it sticks down just enough that the needle catches it. The other thing is the needle also sticks at the bottom, and it's about 3 pounds lower than what my gauge is reading, which I think is reading low as well. I've had this gauge for years. This thing was in the Green Cricket 20 years ago. And it still works, and it's still accurate, so it's just kind of ugly. I need to repaint the black here. It's bigger. This is a standard 2-inch. It's a new. And then I need to file the opening here a little bit so I can put it in. So that's one thing I'm going to do today. I'm exhausted. I'm going to go through the book and look at the schematics because I think this plug right here is the radio plug, so that may be speaker wire, factory speaker wires, because these are not, these are aftermarket. This is I thought it was a Bluetooth decoder, like what I've had in my other vehicles, except that it has you can adjust it. The problem is, I misread the article, and it's actually just an amplifier. So, you got 50 watts front channel, and then 100 watts for a subwoofer, which I don't have hooked up yet. But it gives me tunes, and it does work. Without the Bluetooth, I have to plug in this guy, and it works for now. My phone, I have an iPhone 6. It's dying. It's on its way out. It's in mint condition, but it's really old. I want to get an 11. If I have an 11, I can probably film all these episodes with it instead of using this cheap Chinese POS. And that would work a lot better for me. But the problem is the newer phones don't have that 3.5 millimeter auxiliary port. So then you have to use Bluetooth. So I gotta have a Bluetooth in there. So that's where we're at. These speakers, Matt gave me these speakers. They're just, Walmart speakers. They're nothing fancy, but they work. They sound okay. I need to get some tweeters up here somewhere. Corner maybe. I don't have visors, so I can put them up here. And they're cheap, but, I gotta have tunes. And this thing actually sounds pretty good. I think it'll be pretty awesome with a tweeter. I did get a phone mount, but I'm not real happy with it. Better than nothing, though. What else? What else we got going on, Luke? No Luke. I don't know where he went. Okay. So, once upon a time, I had a bunch of these Bluetooth things. Like, they were $1, $2, $5. They were super cheap. They've gone up. They probably doubled in price now. Plus, you have to pay shipping on them now. But I had like 4 or 5 of them, and they were in a Ziploc baggie. And I had them out when I was working on the Courier, when I was putting it together. And I don't remember why I took them out, but I had them out, and then I put them somewhere after we cleaned it up, and I can't remember where I put them. So if I can find those, I do have a Bluetooth thing coming, but I may just swap this in. But I'm going to go out and look in the other vehicles, the Courier and the Jeep, and see if it might be in there. So we will see you later.